I think gentleman over there and then a lady over there. We'll maybe take both together because we're beginning to run out of time. So if you ask your question, then you ask yours, and then we'll... Thank you.
What's your view on developing industries such as carbon offsetting?
Okay.
Hi. I always just wanted to come back to the question about being memorable. And I'm doing a master in environmental sustainability. And the more I study, the more I feel like myself becoming more radical and thinking that we need bigger change, real transformations. And I'm always a bit worried that people won't accept me if I try to be radical. So how radical can you be? How daring can you be, is my question.
Okay, two great questions. So what do we think about consumer power in terms of this? And maybe even related to that, how radical can we be? Come on, how radical can we be? Who wants to answer either or both of those?
I think we need transformational change. We need new society. So I think we've got to be radical. We're not going to achieve, even if you look at the Scottish government's targets, we need 80% carbon emissions reduction by 2050. We need almost total decarbonisation of the energy supply, total decarbonisation of the heating supply, total decarbonisation of transport. We're not going to get there without being radical. So get to it. I think there's no question. We're talking about massive change here. So forget caution. Let's do it. And it's much more exciting. It is so much more exciting because change is a very exciting business. I'm really not interested in carbon. I'm very interested in change. So let's go for change. That's the thing. Carbon offsetting, it's fine, but it's the last resort. And we should be working on much more interesting, much more radical solutions. We've got to change society.
Come off the fence,
Are we going down the line? Should we go down the line? To answer this question first, I mean, it's tough for me because I think technology can help us to a point, but I really am a purist when it comes to these type of things. And we talk a lot in sustainable development about technological fixes and whether or not they are actually effective. Technology is doing a lot. I know this isn't exactly your question, but I'm just thinking about, you're talking about new kind of inventions, innovations. Someone in Brighton invented fabric that absorbs CO2 out of the air. I don't know how it's disposed of, but it does. And if we can all start wearing T-shirts and clothes made out of this fabric, would we solve the issue of CO2 emissions? I don't know, but would it help? I'm sure. People have invented trees, fake trees that absorb CO2 out of the atmosphere. In terms of consumer power, we have massive power. The amount of water we use, energy we use, gas, everything. Don't forget that we are collectively contributing to this problem, and it's the small steps we make that will impact and affect change. Legislation needs to be part of that, and bigger investments need to be part of that. Some people feel that, I'm just one person, what can I do? But every day you eat and sleep are affecting the planet. Don't forget that. On radical, I wrote my dissertation on why radical environmentalism is counterproductive to achieving a sustainable future. And I wrote it because I was very upset about one thing. We need to be radical, and I think there's a difference between radical ideology and radical tactics. I think there's a time and place for radical tactics, and they can be effective. But back to your question, people may not take you seriously. And I'm not saying you should sell out or you should dumb down what your beliefs are or your values. You have to remember who your audience is. And I think if you keep that in mind, be radical in your disposition and your values and your passion. We're not going to change this planet unless we're radical, but not everyone is there with us. And so I think you have to think about who you're interacting with in order to be effective and radical.
Reluctantly, I agree.
Yeah, me too. That's exactly what I was going to say as well. Be kind of radical but realistic at the same time. If you're going in a job interview, don't go in super radical or they'll be like, nah. So yeah, be radical in your thoughts and your dreams and your passions kind of thing, but also be realistic and kind of what can be achieved.
Yeah, exactly the same point. On offsetting and consumer power, yeah, I guess not much said as well. We do have a lot of say. Every purchase is like a vote. You're voting if you're, getting your clothes in a company that uses sweatshops, you vote okay for that. So people are ignorant a lot of the time, And the more conscious we are about the way things are produced and where they go when they become waste, the more change we can do as a society. So if you look at your carbon footprinting, you know, obviously lots of choices that you make as a consumer, they I don't know what proportion of the carbon footprint they come to. And then there's another part that's you kind of not really responsible for directly. That's your utilities. You know, you don't really always get to choose how things come to you, how your roads are built. So that's legislation and systems and organizational action. So there's two parts of the story at least, if not more than that. But it's definitely not something to ignore. For offsetting, well, recently I was in a meeting with Department for Energy and Climate Change, and they were preparing for Lima and later for Paris negotiations, and they're looking into the possibilities of merging carbon markets, because it's a relatively new thing, this trading schemes of carbon permits, and it's apparently very complicated. And maybe there's a place for that. I'm not sure. It's not for me to say. I don't really know much. But the point, what I'm trying to say is that even if it gets developed to a workable and effective level, it will take a long time, as these things do. And in the meantime, we're getting warmer. So don't wait around, basically, for some solutions to come by. Some things you can already do now. So both, like, do stuff now and look into the future, be radical and be realistic at the same time. We need all sorts of things at the same time.
Well, I think to be a good radical and effective one, then you've got to be ready. And I would say, you know, Burns was an effective radical because he could write good sentences. And that's what it is. If you can't write good sentences, then you're not going to be a very radical writer. And therefore, there are skills. So when you're doing your university course, these are the skills you are developing. And if you don't, in fact, develop those, then it doesn't matter how much you care about the environment, you'll be able to do very little about it. So it is not just how you think, it's what you've been educated and able to do.
Can I just finish off? Because I agree, as I say, reluctantly, but it's not completely reluctantly, because my brother is very successful at selling software, big software to companies all over the world. And he spends most of his time researching the company he's selling to. He does very little talking to them, and he finds out exactly what they're going to need. And I think if you're going to be a successful radical, you do need to know what the person is going to be open to listening to, and you need to get in there and work from within. So I would say you need those values. You need to make sure that you are being honest, as we heard earlier. You need to be clear about why you're going, where you're going, and not fool people. But I think you need to be good at getting in there and getting into a position of influence.
I would also say as well that absolutely on that point about making change, I made a lot of changes before I arrived here in terms of environmental regulation. I have a confession to make. I'm an expert on environmental regulation. I find it very, really boring. It's really dull. I had no real interest in environmental regulation. I had an interest in making change to protect the environment. So I taught myself environmental regulation because that's the tools that I needed in order to make the change. And I agree with people. You have to be ready to make the change and speak the language. If you just shout at people about what should happen, some of them will listen, but some of them will say, "What do you know about it? You know, come and work with me." So I would add that. Thank you all very much, and can we thank our speakers?